So Rand Paul, but it was really interesting. You did not like that particularly progressives were praising Rand Paul, even though you agreed with what Rand Paul was saying. I think this is interesting. So what made you angry?
Okay,
about
what
it?
pisses me off about what progressives were saying, progressives were hailing Rand Paul. At least he's brave enough to stand up there. At least Rand Paul is the one doing something about this. If you don't like what Rand Paul is doing, you're showing that you're a partisan hack. You're only for the Democrats, which is not true. I mean, Rand Paul is only doing this because he's Rand Paul. It's his brand. He doesn't really care about drone strikes. He does care about drone strikes in terms of the executive branch doing it. He cares that Barack Obama can drone strike you. He cares. You know what? He would even care about George Bush drone striking you. It's not Republican or Democrat matter to Rand Paul. It's a matter of big government. I guarantee you that if a state passed some law where their police departments could drone strike a criminal who they're currently chasing on the highway, he would be fine with that.
That would be an interesting question to ask Rand Paul. You're calling Rand. So basically, what you're saying is Rand Paul's sort of like right for the wrong reasons, and like a lot of the people that call up this show, he has absolutely insane and ludicrous views about states' rights. So his issue is not with drone strikes per se; it's who's doing them. So if the state of Alabama reinstituted slavery and then used drones to enforce that rule, he would be fine with it. That's what you're saying.
In fact, Rand Paul is for drones in terms of protecting our borders. I mean, I assume he doesn't mean sending armed drones down there to, blow up an illegal immigrant.
But to monitor people.
Yes, but to monitor people.
Yeah.
But you know what? His argument also includes the whole, but if we let them do this, how far will it go? If we let a drone monitor our border, how far until we start blowing up people who's crossing our border who we think is part of the drug trafficking trade here in this country?
No, that's a good question. The other really big thing here that I think you're pointing to is basically as long as we have issues like this, like drones and like due process and like kill lists and all. And actually, I should say, I think Ron Wyden, who was a Democrat, obviously he spoke during the filibuster, supported Rand Paul's filibuster. So there has been a few people besides Rand Paul have kind of highlighted this issue. But I think the really big problem is, and you saw this during Ron Paul's campaign, that if the only people who are going to come out and speak a certain way on certain issues are these really far-right extreme libertarians, then these issues get polluted. Like that guy Jim who calls up, or used to call up all the time until maybe it doesn't seem like he calls anymore. But he used to call up all the time, and it was always this sort of one-sided thing about drones, which I think is I sometimes I actually question why people get so singularly focused on drones. I think that it can get overemphasized at a certain point, but it is a really important issue. It's an important thing to figure out. And then
I'm not saying that there isn't any value in what Rand Paul did. Sure. There's value in what Rand Paul did. In fact, it sparked the drone conversation. But what I'm saying is people think, Rand Paul might have these ideals and these principles on this, that, and this that I don't agree with. But, he's standing up for the Constitution and what's right. And, I mean, what Rand Paul's doing is he's out for Rand Paul. And I know people might not agree with that, but, I mean, yesterday, what was being talked about online? What was the hashtag they used? It wasn't, filibuster or drones. The hashtag that was going around on Twitter all day was stand with Rand. This was all about Rand Paul. And when conservatives talk about, look at Ron Paul making the founders proud and upholding the Constitution, they're not talking about the drone issue in particular. They're talking about Rand Paul just standing up to Barack Obama on any issue. This could have been about anything, and they would have been like, oh, look what Rand Paul is doing. This is great. The only reason it got bigger than just in that conservative world is because a lot of progressives and a lot of people in general don't agree with the drone policy, especially when it comes to American citizens.
Well, I think what I was saying is I think the problem is that if a guy like Rand Paul is going to be the most high-profile spokesperson on an issue like this, that's really intrinsically problematic, because that's why you see kids showing up at colleges to hear like his dad talk, or maybe potentially him now after this kind of breakout moment, to hear about drones or to hear about war, or to hear about the other things that they're concerned about and other people aren't speaking to in the same way. And then all this other garbage gets shoveled in the same way. Like, oh, maybe the Civil Rights Act wasn't such a good idea, or maybe we should all buy gold, or maybe the, Violence Against Women Act, isn't something we should be voting on. I think that's a big problem.